So tonight, only one team can win $100,000, the trophy, and become the first ever Domino Masters. Judges?
After a lot of deliberation, we unanimously agreed on the winner. A team who have shown amazing technical prowess using beautiful 3D structures to consistently tell dynamic, engaging stories.
Without further ado, the first ever title of Domino Masters goes to Dominers!
Oh my gosh! Wow!
I have been waiting so long to finally be able to say openly that my team, the Dominers, are Domino Masters Season 1 champions. When I look back on that whole experience, the thing I'm overwhelmingly proud of, more than anything else, is just our team dynamic. I'm proud of how much we pushed ourselves, I'm proud of how ambitious we were, and I'm proud of how we were able to make those ambitions pay off. In fact, one of the things our team ended up becoming known for was that we would always have at least one moment in every build where there was a machine trick without a backup line, and there was this moment where everything hung in the balance and it absolutely had to work or else there would be a full stop. And we were comfortable doing that because I was confident in my ability to make my machines work under pressure. And I'm happy to report that every single one of the machines I built worked in the topple. And I can safely say that I had a 100% success rate on Domino Masters, which is just unreal. Is there an element of luck in that streak? Yeah, of course. But there's a ton of designing and building and testing and fixing that happens behind the scenes that you just don't see in the show because there's just not enough time for it all. And that brings us to this machine. There's a ton of work that went into the problem-solving process for each and every one of these tricks, so I wanted to share with you the clever little mechanisms and neat little solutions that I ended up coming up with. So I've selected 7 different tricks from across all 5 of our builds to recreate at a smaller scale and then combine into a full machine, which is what you see behind me. Throughout the Domino Masters season, I've been posting videos on social media after every one of our builds detailing the behind-the-scenes process of 1 to 2 tricks from that episode. So this video is a compilation of all of those videos that I've been posting. So if you have been following me on social media, you have seen these videos, but hold on, don't go just yet. There is something that you haven't seen, which is the entire machine in action. So stay tuned to the end to see that. Alright, let's begin. In the qualifiers for our Wild West build, I built a trick where a wagon rolls down a ramp and crashes into a domino wall. The challenging part is that the wagon was extremely heavy, and I needed to figure out a way to reliably hold it in place, but also be able to release the wagon with a relatively small input force. Why is a small input force so important? Well, when you have a large heavy object, like our wagon here, it takes a lot of force to hold it in place. And therefore, it'll take a lot of force to remove whatever object is holding it in place. To put it a different way, imagine you're trying to prevent a bowling ball from rolling down a slope, so you put a brick in front of it. Okay, great. Except now you have to figure out how to move the brick. And that's exactly the situation I was hoping to avoid with the wagon release. I didn't want it to be just as difficult to remove the release mechanism as it was to hold the wagon back in the first place. So I needed to design a release mechanism that could take a relatively small input force and magnify it into a larger output force that is strong enough to release the really heavy wagon. And finally, after several iterations, I finally found a design that works. Now, you don't see it too well in the actual show, so let's take a closer look. The first thing to realize is that the wagon had a handle, and the handle had a crossbar at the end. And my solution was to take the crossbar and lock it in behind 2 wheels. Now, here's the secret ingredient. The crossbar is pushed in only far enough to get it to stay, but with any small nudge upward, the crossbar will want to roll over the top of the wheels, which of course releases the wagon. Now the only thing left to do is figure out how to slightly nudge the handle upwards, and the best way to do that is with a good old simple lever. Now, when I pull down on this side of the lever, that pushes the handle up and releases the wagon down the board. And on the show, I used a small to large domino with a string to do this, so I'm going to do the same thing here. And there you go. That's the wagon release. In the playoffs, for our Las Vegas build, I built, among other things, two main tricks I want to talk about today. The magic trick and the roulette wheel. Let's start with the magic trick. The magic trick we chose is this magically appearing flower. And if you hadn't already guessed, it works because the flower has a magnet on the end and it's stuffed inside the hollow magic wand. And when the wand is inserted into the pot, the magnets attach so that when the wand is removed, the flower is revealed. Pretty basic stuff for a human. But getting a machine to perform those actions smoothly is easier said than done. Now, at its core, there are only two main motions required here. It's just the arm coming down and the arm going back up. Getting both of those motions to happen on their own, not the most challenging thing. But keep in mind, this is meant to look like a magic trick being performed. And it would look super weird if the hand comes down, stays there for a while, and then comes back up. Like, that's not how the trick is meant to look. It's meant to be a magically appearing flower, you know? The hand comes down, and then poof, there's the flower. It appears instantly, like magic. So, what this means is the hand needs to come down, and then as soon as it's down all the way, immediately reverse direction and come back up. This could be done with two separate connection systems that are just timed perfectly, but that is super risky. So, here's the problem. How do I make a lever that reverses direction automatically? The solution is adjusting the weight with magnets. Let me show you what I mean. At the beginning, the side holding the magic wand is heavier, so it goes down. And on the other side, we have a magnet. That's this red brick thing. Then, once the hand reaches the down position, the magnet is close enough to this metal weight for the weight to become attracted to the magnet. And once the magnet is attached, that side then becomes heavier, which makes that side go down, and that, of course, lifts the hand. Interestingly, this recreated version of the trick works really nicely, but on the show, I ran into an extra layer of complication where the magnet couldn't jump far enough, so the support holding the magnet had to be removed as well. The solution to that problem is too much for this video, but for the curious, here's a recreation of what the problem was. I just wanted to clear up why the version on the show has a couple extra moving parts. So that is the magic trick. In order to make the lever change direction automatically, I used a magnet that gets automatically attached to one side to change which side of the lever is heavier. Let's move on to the roulette wheel. The idea here is very basic. Just get a roulette wheel to start spinning and then drop a ball in. The first thing I tried to get the wheel to start rotating is wrapping a string around the center spoke and then running that string off the table and hanging a weight. So as the weight falls, it unwraps the center and makes the wheel turn. The problem that I ran into relatively quickly is that with a traditional pulley, the distance that you can pull something for is equivalent to the distance that the weight can fall. And because the roulette wheel wasn't all that high off the platform, I'd say maybe a foot, foot and a half, I wasn't able to get in as many rotations as I wanted before the weight had fallen far enough to just be on the platform. So the problem is that I can't really change how high off the platform the roulette wheel is. So I can't change how far the weight falls. Is there still a way to make the roulette wheel spin for longer? Luckily, I remembered that using a double pulley allows you to double the distance that you can pull something for, in this case, the number of rotations of the roulette wheel, without changing how far the weight can fall. To make a double pulley, instead of just having the string come down off the side of the table and attach directly to the weight, you add another pulley point to the weight itself and then loop the string back up to the table. So there you go. That is how I used a double pulley to increase the number of rotations I could get on the roulette wheel without changing how far the weight actually fell. In the quarterfinals for our science build, there were two tricks in particular, the chemicals pouring and the self-driving car, that I've recreated here because I want to show you some of the behind-the-scenes details and problem-solving moments that you never hear about on the show. Let's start with the chemical pouring trick. The basic idea here is that there's a string wound around an axle, and as the motor rotates the axle, the string is able to unwind, which lowers the beaker and pours the water. But here's where we get to the one main problem with most tricks that involve motors, which is that motors are not sentient. They don't know when to turn off by themselves, and they'll just keep rotating forever. So if we think about what this trick is going to do, we've got a string that's unwinding around the axle, and at some point it's going to unwind all the way. And if the motor continues rotating, it's going to start winding the string in the other direction. Now at first that's fine, because all that will do is lift the beaker. But at some point the beaker will be lifted all the way, and then you've got a situation where a string is pulling on an object that isn't meant to move. So all that's going to do is either jam the motor, or worse, break something else in the machine. Which leads us to our main problem. How can we create some kind of system that will automatically turn off the motor at the right time before we reach that catastrophic situation? The solution I came up with involves a string stopper, which is just an object secured to a specific point along a string. The key insight here is that the string can wind up for longer than it unwinds. Think about it. When the string is unwinding, that's lowering the beaker is already half tilted, so it only needs to unwind enough to lower the beaker halfway. But when it winds up and raises the beaker can return all the way to its upright position, which means the string can wind up a little bit longer. Now, if we turn our attention back to the string stopper, what all that means is that this point will go up as the string unwinds, and then reverse direction and come back down as the string winds. But because we can make the string wind for longer than it unwinds, this point can actually go down further than where it started. So, if we put a lever right below where the string stopper starts, it won't even get touched until the string stopper goes all the way up and then all the way back down and then a little bit further. And if that lever just so happens to release a domino that turns off the motor, well, we've now successfully avoided a situation where the motor jams up and or destroys part of the machine. So there you go. That's the chemical pouring trick, and that's how I made a system that turns off the motor automatically. Now let's talk about the self-driving car. The idea for this trick was to build a car that drives forward, but then makes turns at specific points to maneuver around obstacles in the roadway. The problem here is pretty straightforward. How do I make a car that, for all intents and purposes, steers itself? I'm actually just going to reveal the solution to the problem right up front, and you'll find out why in a sec. So, the gist is, you've got these little L brackets on either side of the car, and you've got these vertical poles that stick out of the ground. And these poles are configured in such a way so that as the car drives forward, the L brackets on the car hook around the poles, forcing the car to turn. Now, if the poles were just statically secured straight to the table, the car would just run into them and then do donuts around the pole forever. So the clever bit is that once the direction of motion of the car is in line with the hinge, the pole falls over, releasing the car and allowing it to continue in a straight line. So that's how you make a car that steers, basically, by itself. Except I have to come clean a little bit here. So out of all the tricks I built on Domino Masters that I'm recreating in this machine, this is the only one where I knew the solution before starting to build it. So there really wasn't much of a problem-solving process to speak of. It's just a really cool mechanism, and I wanted to share it with you. In fact, it was inspired by a Pitakara Suichi clip that I found a few years ago, where they had a little wooden car with a paper sail that got blown across the table by some fans. And they used the exact same technique to make the car turn. And I remember the first time I watched this, I just thought it was brilliant. And it always stuck with me. I always wanted to recreate it and put my own twist on it. So I really enjoyed paying homage to this trick on the show. I'm really happy it worked on the show, and of course, I enjoyed recreating it here as well. So that is the self-driving car trick, and that's how I made a car that can steer by itself, more or less. In the semifinals, for our Hot Wheels build, one of the tricks that I focused on was the construction crane. The idea was to have a construction crane roll across the platform while lowering its wrecking ball to destroy a tower of blocks. So the actual problem that I want to take you through the behind-the-scenes problem-solving process of is kind of a two-part problem. There's the initial fundamental challenge of doing a trick like this, and there's the additional constraint that I imposed upon myself, which we'll get to. But we're going to start with just talking about the initial challenge, which is how do you get something to move across the platform, particularly something as big and heavy as the construction crane. A lot of the time when things move, it's because they are rolling downhill. And that's not an option for our construction crane. It's rolling directly on the platform itself, which is of course level. So that's out of the question. Another way to move an object is by pulling it with a string. Of course that means you need something to pull the string, like a falling weight. But remember, we're working right on the platform here, not some elevated surface, so where are we going to hang a weight from? The weight has nowhere to fall. There's no potential energy, so the string and weight method, also out of the question. So excluding other extreme options for making stuff move, like using motors, there's really only one option left for how to move this giant construction crane across the platform, and that's to make it self-propelled somehow. My first thought when I think of self-propelled vehicle is the Mousetrap Car. It's like one of those classic high school science Olympiad projects. The gist is you've got a string wound around the back axle, and as the mousetrap goes off, it pulls the string to unwind the axle and make the wheels turn. But the important thing to realize is that the mousetrap isn't really the essential ingredient, it's the winding around the axle part. So as long as you got something on the car to pull the string, you can make a self-propelled vehicle. In fact, I've done this a couple years ago, where I built a car that's powered by a ball that enters a cup, and as the weight of the ball pushes the cup downwards, it pulls the string to turn the wheels. Because I was thinking about how to use the Mousetrap Car technique to move the construction crane, that led to the realization that the falling weight that unwinds the axle could be disguised as the wrecking ball on the construction crane. And that would be extra cool because as the construction crane rolls forward, the wrecking ball falls down as it unwinds around the axle, resulting in this really cool dual motion. Sadly, here's where things fall off the rails a little bit, because the Mousetrap Car technique didn't end up working. Look, I was already well over my head in terms of making the crane itself, and that's just pretty basic woodworking. There was no universe in which I was building my own wheels and my own axles from scratch to put underneath the crane to make it roll. So the only way this thing was ever going to move was if I just found stuff with wheels. And the skateboards did the job perfectly. But that means I don't have an axle to wind the string around anymore. So I'm basically back at square one in terms of how do I move the construction crane. And to make matters worse, I got so excited about the dual motion of the wrecking ball falling as the crane moves that now I have to find a solution that incorporates that as well. The solution that I ended up coming up with came from thinking about what a wrecking ball is, essentially, which is a pendulum. I realized I could have the wrecking ball hanging from one of the rafters above our platform and swing it over to one side, and then use the force of it wanting to return to the center to pull the construction crane across the platform. So that's exactly what I did, and it worked perfectly. And of course, you also get that dual motion that I was really excited about, where the wrecking ball falls as the crane moves forward. In the finale, for our treasure hunt build, one of the tricks I spent the longest time on was the secret drawer that slides out from underneath the elevated domino field while carrying another domino field. What made this trick so difficult to figure out was not only that it has to slide slowly enough that the dominoes standing on top don't fall over early, it's also crucial to our story that the secret drawer is a secret, meaning that the mechanisms responsible for pulling the drawer out need to be hidden as much as possible. So that's basically the problem. How can I create a moving platform that can carry a standing domino field without you being able to see any of the machinery making it happen? The solution? Tape measures. For a while I've been intrigued by the idea of using the retracting force in a tape measure to pull an object, and the secret drawer turned out to be the perfect opportunity to give it a try. Once I built the actual drawer itself, I rigged it up to some tape measures to give it a test, and on the show I actually needed 3 tape measures to get the proper force required, but it did work. It was able to move the drawer across the platform at a nice, slow, consistent speed. So now the only thing left to do was figure out how to hide the tape measures. And what better place to hide them than underneath the giant elevated platform? Of course, now the tape measures are pulling in the wrong direction, so I need a pulley system to change the direction and allow the platform to slide out. And to make that as invisible as possible, I of course used fishing line. However, I did need to place 2 pulley points outside the platform, which aren't invisible, but that was a compromise I was willing to make. So, those are all the secrets of the secret drawer. I used tape measures to provide the force to slide the drawer out at a slow, consistent speed, and then used a pulley system so I could hide the tape measures out of sight. So there you go. I know when you're watching the show, it sometimes feels like a trick will just appear out of nowhere. Like, you'll get one shot of me playing around with a pulley, and then next thing you know, the entire roulette wheel trick is done. So hopefully this gives you a bit of a better idea of how some of the tricks from the show ended up getting made. But now it's time for the moment you've all been waiting for. Let's see this machine in action. So thanks for watching the Domino Masters machine. If you liked the video, leave a comment down below telling me what you thought, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss the next video. I make machines like this all the time. I also want to give a huge thank you to my supporters on Patreon for making this video possible. If you want to join these lovely people and get your name on a custom sign revealer for every machine, while also supporting chain reaction art, you can click the link in the description. If you want to see more of my machines, you can click right here. And if you want to subscribe to my channel, you can click right here. I'm JackofAllSpace98. Bye for now.